Hello everyone and welcome finally to the penultimate round of the second Piatigorsky Cup 1966. Robert James Fischer faces Boris Vasiljevich Spassky for the second time this tournament and for the third time ever. Their famous game, the first game they ever played in Mar del Plata in 1960, Boris Spassky crushed Bobby in 29 moves using the King's Gambit. Second game they ever played was the Grunfeld Exchange variation that we've seen in the first cup of the second Piatigorsky Cup, where Spassky again defeated Fischer, and this is now the third game that they will ever play, and of many more to come, as the two of them will play two World Chess Championship, one World Chess Championship match and the other sort of World Chess Championship match, but not really. And like we discussed in the previous video, a Marshall Gambit will be employed in this game, which is, I mean, more than we could possibly ask. And yeah, it's not just about this game. Bobby, after having a spectacular second half of the tournament and Spassky more or less just drawing games, he did have that one win against Larsen in the second half of the tournament. They're now tied with 10 points each. And of course, like I said, it's not only about this game, as it's also about the next game. This is the penultimate round. We also have the final round where Bobby will face reigning world champion Tigran Petrosyan, and Spassky will have sort of an easier opponent in the likes of Jan Hein Dona. And I've been, many of you have mentioned this, that Jan Hein actually does not like to be called that, so we will refer to him as just Dona. But yeah, I mean, of course, he was a great player, but not... in 1966, not, of course, at the strength of the reigning world champion Tigran Vartanovic Petrosyan. And also something Bobby has to take into account if he's to win the tournament. So he has to win with white because, well, with black, you simply cannot expect to beat the Iron Tiger or, he's been called many names, but he was just unbreakable, unbendable. His positions were unbreachable. So if he wanted to draw, there was absolutely nothing you could do. Maybe later on, when Bobby finally faced him in the world, before facing Spassky in the World Chess Championship match in the 1971 Candidates match, if you've seen those games, okay, Bobby was at a completely different level there. But for the moment, Tigran is still the reigning world champion. And something that I've never really mentioned about this tournament, the second Piatigorsky Cup, is that it's not the first event. Of course, there was the first Piatigorsky Cup, but there was never the third or any other to follow, simply because it costs too much. Or rather, they don't really specify the reason for not continuing the Piatigorsky Cup, but it seems like... no one really wanted to get involved. Mrs. Piatigorsky was the one who was really pulling all the strings here, and yeah, it just cost too much, and they couldn't get any additional funding, because they've increased the prize fund for the entire tournament from $10,000 to $20,000 from 1963 to 1966, and if you put this into any sort of inflation calculator out there, I don't know if those are any good. But I've used several of them, and you get like $20,000 in 1966 would account to something short of maybe $200,000 in 2025, which is an insane amount of money for a chess tournament, even for an invitational. Like, it's more money than you had this year in Tata Steel. Tata Steel was, I think, around $150,000 or $160,000, and this would account to maybe $200,000. So it was just so much money, and of course everyone very gladly accepted. Mr. Piatigorsky, who was also a world-renowned cellist, he also went to Russia. He had a Tchaikovsky competition where people would just compete who would perform Tchaikovsky better, and he would be one of the judges, and then the players would come in person and then accept the invitation to Mr. Piatigorsky. So it was a really, really big event. It's a shame it never actually continued. But yeah, just wanted to share that as well, as I don't think we've addressed it. now let's get into what we've basically come here for. That is the chess moves, and it's Robert James Fischer with white versus Boris Vasiljevich Spassky. Let's check it out. Fischer with white opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5. Of course, you guys know what's coming, as I've already announced the marshal. Knight f3. We have knight to c6 and bishop to b5. The Ruy Lopez is on the board, and also something that I think really is important to mention, because it really pumps up the feeling about this game, is that over 1,000 people came to watch Spassky and Fischer play. They could not, of course, allow everyone to come in. It would be, I mean, too crowded, but they have allowed 900 people to come in. However, they do say that over 1,000 has attended. Like I said, Isaac Kazdan has made a book on the second Piatigorsky Cup, and he mentions this extensively. It was August 14th. It was it was a nice Sunday, and everyone came to watch Bobby and Boris play. Unfortunately, not everyone could attend. Even, I mean, okay, today you have streaming, so it's not it's not quite the same. But 1,000 people arriving is something to marvel at, definitely. But okay, we have bishop to b5 and pawn to a6. Attacking the bishop, we have bishop back to a4 and knight to f6. Castles by Bobby and bishop to e7 by Boris. So nothing new being played here. This is the standard close Ruy Lopez. Rook to e1, pawn to b5 and bishop to b3. We have castles kingside. Pawn to c3. Fischer invites Spassky. Are you up for a challenge? Do you want to chicken out with pawn to d6, continuing the closed Ruy Lopez, or do you accept the challenge? Do you go for the marshal? Do you play d5 here? Spassky says, I've already beaten you in the king's gambit. I can beat you in the marshal gambit as well. So let's see what happens. d5. The marshal gambit has been employed. E captures on d5, knight captures. We have knight captures on e5, knight captures, and the rook captures on e5. So this is the original setup of the marshal attack, as Frank James Marshall thought about a long time ago, some 60 years ago, and already we have a deviation from that game. In the original Marshall's Gambit, Frank James Marshall went knight to f6. In the famous game, he lost to Capablanca. Some of you may not have heard about this, but supposedly Frank James Marshall sort of kept this idea a secret from the entire world, and he only, he waited for a very special moment to employ this gambit. He employed it against Jose Raul Capablanca, the legend himself, and he ended up losing the game. It was played in 1918 in New York, and it was a brilliant game. If you haven't seen it, I also have a video on it. Quite a nice game to see how Capablanca gets out of it, seeing it for the first time. But here already a deviation. We have pawn to c6, and it is considered, of course, even by today's standards, a much better move than Marshall's immediate knight to f6, and of course it was even in those days. So pawn to c6, and now comes a move that pretty much no one played at the time except Fischer. It is, I think it's even considered sort of a Fischer creation in the position, because d4 is a pretty standard move here. Everyone plays that. If you played against the marshal or you play the marshal, you will either play or play against d4. d3, sometimes this is also played. You could also maybe see bishop captures on d5, although not that often, and then let's say captures and pawn to d4. You could see just a rook, an unprovoked rook to e1, also very popular. But here Fischer played pawn to g3, and it's very odd, because in the marshal, you will have something like maybe bishop d6, queen coming to h4, the bishop coming to h3, the bishop coming to g4. All of these are all-known marshal ideas. But playing g3, you kind of avoid all of that, but you also kind of waste time. So what can Spassky do about this? Spassky played knight to f6, and at the time, it was a completely new move. Fischer already had this position a year prior to the second Piatigorsky Cup in 1966. In Havana, Cuba in 1965, he had it against O'Kelly, but O'Kelly played bishop to f6 in this position, and their game ended in a draw. Spassky goes the other way around. Instead of bishop to f6, he goes knight to f6. And also, I will mention this, probably the last deviation I will make this game. There is a game from 2005 from the Chorus tournament, which is nowadays the Tata Steel tournament, where bishop to d6 was played. Peter Svidler played it against Judith Polgar. Judith Polgar employed Bobby Fischer's g3 idea against Peter Svidler, and she defeated Svidler in a very, very nice game. I think it's sub 40 moves, so it was pretty awesome. And we know that even though Fischer has spent considerable time with the Polgar family, and he spent a lot of time with Judith, they've never actually played regular chess. They have played chess 960, but they have discussed chess and chess ideas. So I don't know if this, came up and maybe they've discussed this, or, it was just an idea by Judith, but very interesting. I thought you guys would enjoy knowing that. But okay, let's not deviate from the game any further. We have knight to f6 by Spassky, and we can consider this for the 1966, at the time this game was played, a completely new position. So this has never been reached before. So let's see what happens. Pawn to d4. Pretty standard stuff. We have bishop to d6, attacking the rook, rook back to e1, and now bishop to g4, attacking Bobby's queen, and Bobby goes queen to d3. You could also maybe consider pawn to f3. Fischer obviously decided it was unnecessary to weaken the white king by advancing the pawn. And now Spassky strikes with the immediate pawn to c5, the threat being pawn to c4, and this would win the game on the spot. So Fischer can move the bishop, or he could capture on c5 and offer a queen trade. He decides for the latter, because if bishop to c2, then after pawn to c4, you really can't hope to get anything out of this position with white. You will have to move, and then it's black who takes over the position. Queen d7, bishop to h3 is coming. For example, bishop e3, bishop h3, you attack the queen, queen e2, and queen to c6. And now this constant mate pressure on g2 is just annoying. You have to play f3 to stop it. It's the only move that doesn't lose the game on the spot. And now, while okay, the position objectively is equal, why would you do this? There's no reason to do that. So Fischer instead went d captures on c5. We have bishop captures on c5, and now queen captures on d8. Rook a captures on d8, and now bishop to f4. Okay, nicely developing. The queens are off the board. What does Fischer have? Does he have anything that he can maybe use to push for the win? Well, if you count the material, he is up a pawn. He does have 3 versus 2 on the queen side. So if he manages, to start pushing, maybe trade off one of the pawns and then get a pass pawn, could still be a game. Both players still have the bishop pair, so let's see what happens. We have pawn to h6, Spassky ready to win more space on the queen side, with on the king side with pawn to g5, knight to a3, Fischer even inviting bishop captures on a3, as it would sort of ruin his pawn structure, but, once a4 is played, you don't really care. You will have the bishop pair, you will start pushing those pawns, so there is no way Spassky is playing this. So after knight a3, pawn to g5, bishop to e3, and he decides to trade. Bishop captures, rook captures, and rook to d2. So remember, Spassky is not only playing against Bobby this game, he's playing against the remainder of the tournament. He has Donna in the last round, and Fischer has a world champion in the last round. So there's also that to consider. There's no reason for Spassky to push for a win with black here. We have knight to c2 and rook to e8. Spassky, I believe, is hoping that Fischer will overextend, and then Spassky will punish him. We have rook captures on e8, knight captures, and knight to e3, going after the bishop, and now bishop to f3. Bishop to c2, stopping rook captures on b2, but you are sort of paralyzing your own pieces this way. We have knight to d6 and pawn to b3 by Fischer, king to f8, and now pawn to a4, trying to trade off some pawns on the queen side and create a pass pawn. You're still up a pawn, so if you can use it, all the better. We have knight to e4 by Boris, and now the question is, what can Fischer do here? And the Marshall Gambit definitely paid off. Yes, Spassky is down a pawn, but he is up in development. He has more activity. He's threatening to capture on f2, and the question is, what can Fischer do? Does he simply give up the bishop? Or does he try a captures on b5? Is there, even a point in doing this? I will show it because it is a fine line. A captures on b5, and if he allows knight captures on f2, you of course do not want to allow knight to h3 check. This would be devastating, so you have to stop it. Bishop to f5, and now there's this tricky move, pawn to g4, where knight h3 becomes a threat once again. So you give up a piece, bishop captures on g4, and after bishop captures, you will play knight captures, and now b captures on a6, creating a pass pawn here. And it looks promising, but there's a very special relationship between the knight, rook, and king when they are in this position, and that is that you can simply go knight captures on h2, and there is nothing white can do to win the game. For example, a7, knight to f3 check, and you have a perpetual here. Knight f1, you will simply give another check, so it doesn't matter if you go king to e1, knight f3 check, the king has to go back, you will deliver another check. If you try king g1, another check, and the problem is you cannot go to h1 because rook to h2 is checkmate. So while it is a valiant attempt, it would amount to pretty much nothing. So here bishop captures on e4 by Fischer, bishop captures on e4, and now a captures on b5. We have a captures and pawn to b4. So this is very solid, and still Fischer is a pawn up. The pawns really cannot be attacked. They're on dark squares. Spassky has a light square bishop. The rook can't go behind the pass c pawn. d3 if played, that's nothing. You're just gonna put your rook on a passive square, and of course the knight is on a dark square, so the bishop cannot go after the knight. So this is very solid, and if Fischer can maybe somehow get rook a5, rook captures on b5 in, that will be incredible. However, Spassky does have control of the light squares, and if he's not careful, he could either get checkmated or be forced to give up that knight on e3. So here we have rook to b2, Spassky just waiting to see what Bobby does. We have pawn to g4, controlling f5 and h5, king to g7, and king to f1. We have king to f6, rook to a5. Now you're not in danger of getting checkmated, so Fischer tries going after the b5 pawn, but now Spassky goes rook to b1 with check. We have king to e2, and now what do you play here? Is there something that Fischer can do to maybe try and win, and is there something that Spassky can do to maybe get a win? We already said that Spassky does not need a win here. He does have a perpetual that white king is never escaping. He can just give a check. These two squares are covered by the bishop, so there is nothing the white king can do to escape. So it's merely a matter of can Spassky push this for more than a win, and there are basically two attempts here. One is to go active with the king, and one is to try h5. And while this does invite rook captures on b5, and you maybe get your king to a more active square, you're not going to be able to do anything from here. For example, the knight can move, you will give a nice check, let's say king to d3, you will capture on g4, but still it is white who is faster with the b pawn. There's still a lot of time needed to mobilize those pawns on the king side. You have to remove these pawns first, and it's not nearly as fast. So maybe you can hold this, but chances are Fischer would win this with white. Another idea is pawn to h5 here, which okay, there are many moves that you can try. G captures on h5, you could capture on b5 right away. The best attempt would be knight to f1 to use the tempo to go after the bishop on e4. Let's say h captures on g4, knight to d2 with the fork here, bishop f3 check, only move, otherwise you lose on the spot. And now you captures. Let's say rook c1, rook captures on b5, rook captures on c3 check, and you get something like this. And yes, Fischer again is up a pawn, but he can't really win this. All in all, the only two ways for Spassky to continue the game would basically mean that it would be Fischer who would be playing for the win, because there is no way for Spassky to win this. So Spassky continued checking, rook b2 check, king to f1, and he was in this position on move 35 that Bobby and Boris agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. So not a huge victory for either of them in the game, but a huge victory for Boris Spassky, as he does go tied with Bobby Fischer into the final round. But like we said, Spassky faces Donna with white, whereas Bobby will have the black pieces against the reigning world champion Tigran Petrosyan. And the only question is, do you want me to cover those games separately, or would you like to have them in one video, nice chunk of a video where we will discuss everything and finish off the tournament properly? And then I've seen some memorable mentions regarding some of the other games from the second Piatigorsky Cup. I will also cover them, and then we'll see what happens. Maybe we cover some of the active events, maybe we go to another tournament. I'm all ears. Use that hashtag suggestion, and yeah, tell me what you guys want to see. But yeah, nothing. There's nothing Bobby could do to even push for anything here. It's interesting that he chose this G3 line against Boris. Even employing it last year against O'Kelly, he couldn't get more than a draw. But yeah, he probably thought. I mean, Spassky was a master of the martial attack, and playing the main lines, he just thought that no way. Is there going to be anything there against Spassky? So he tried this G3 creation that is basically the Bobby Fischer creation. I think it could even be called the Fischer variation of the martial in the literature. I'm not sure about that, but it very well could be. So yeah, very nicely done by Boris. Third ever game against Bobby Fischer. Boris has 2 wins and a draw. So basically this draw is a huge victory for Bobby. So it's the first time Bobby ever faced Boris Spassky without losing to him. So, even though he wasn't happy, it is a little bit of an accomplishment. But yeah, many more games will have to pass before Fischer gets that first win against Spassky, and we all know when that happened, especially if you watched my Bobby Fischer saga. If you haven't, I mean, what are you still doing watching other stuff? So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Very much looking forward to covering last round games of Bobby and Boris. I would like to thank David Gasparian, Mike Manson, Rohaho Hostetla, More Classical, and Christopher Medema for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And I would have covered this game yesterday, but I was invited by my 2 brothers-in-law to go watch the game Croatia versus France, and it was a really nice one. It was a pretty long drive, some 5 to 6 hours to split, but it was a good game to attend, and Croatia won a very nice victory. So it was a good trip. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.